Well, joining me now is my colleague Jen Psaki. Her new book, Say More, Lessons from Work, the White House and the World. It is out now. Congrats, Jen. You're the reason I need a little more makeup to, conceal the bags under my eyes. I was up way too late reading your book. We'll get to it in just a second.
Thank you.
All right. So President Biden also said in this campaign event, the threat that Trump poses to democracy is greater than what he posed in the first term. It's clear that when he lost in 2020, something snapped in him. The president also goes around claiming that world leaders grab his arm. They say they're worried about their own democracies if Donald Trump wins. How does he hone that message of democracy being on the line and make sure people aren't tuning it out? How does he make it personal to every American out there?
Well, I think he's got to talk about the specifics, and he's been doing this. But when we talk about a threat to democracy, and I certainly do this on my show, it means things like what's in the Project 2025 plan, by the way, is online on the Heritage Foundation website. Things like taking over a branch of government, the Justice Department, and making the rule of law work for you as president. That's not how it's supposed to work. That means that a president would be immune from crimes. Clearly, Trump wants that. That matters. It means you got to be specific about the things that the threats to our democracy means. It means your voice and your vote may not be heard and valued in the same way, making it more difficult to express that. It means all sorts of things. And I expect and I hope we'll hear the campaign and him do more and more of that.
Yeah. We have some new reporting today, Jen, that Biden plans to host a major fundraiser in L.A. next week with former President Obama and some celebs, including George Clooney and Julia Roberts. They're certainly trying to boost fundraising numbers and also use social media to engage voters, right? How important is this fundraising, and can their campaign dollars stretch significantly further than Trump, since he is spending so much of his donations on enormous legal bills?
Well, the Biden campaign has a huge cash advantage right now. That will probably narrow as things get closer, but they know that in order to pay for things like, I think they have almost 50 offices in Wisconsin, they have them around in many of these states. It's going to be decided between 6 and 7 states. They've been opening them all across the country. In order to pay for ads, for digital ads, for organizing, they need to keep fundraising. So this is an opportunity to get a big bang out of one event or two events that he's doing there. That's good. A lot of what they'll do fundraising is online, but it's all toward this goal of getting the message out, turning the vote out, and that's how they can kind of combat some of this difficulty that they have just because of what's happening in the world that we all talk about, which is the fact that their opponent is on trial, and that is taking up a lot of the earned media oxygen right now.
Yeah. Okay, time to get to the book, because you wrote about your very first conversation with President Biden and the First Lady, and you wisely asked how you could work best with them. And the First Lady said, "We have been through a lot, and we ask that you always be honest with us, always tell us what is coming." How important is it to be honest with the person occupying the Oval Office, and how much does it concern you when we see reports, and when you reference the 2025 group, right, from the Heritage Foundation, Trump hiring yes men and those who are going to let him stay in his own bubble? In fact, that quote is from a chapter called Having Tough Conversations with Your Family, Your Colleagues, and Joe Biden. I mean,
That's true.
Folks who work with Trump ought to read it.
No doubt about it. And look, I think part of what I learned over the course of my time working for two presidents is how to provide feedback. I'm not saying it's easy, but it took me some time to do it. And every president or every CEO or prominent person requires a different approach to that. But nobody needs yes men and yes women. They need honest advice. That's part of it. The challenge is what Trump is looking to do is not surround himself with people that he will provide that kind of advice and that kind of candor. He's surrounding himself with sycophants and acolytes. He's made that pretty clear. And that is something that many people who have worked in the first Trump administration have warned about. So to go back to your earlier question, Alex, when President Biden warns about the threat of a second term and how democracy could be at greater risk, it's in part because even if you didn't like some of the people in the first administration, at least some of them stood up to him and told him that things he was doing were not right, were not moral, were not good for the country.
Yeah. So this book is called Say More, and you say it's not about talking louder or using more words. There is a story that you tell about explaining your boundaries, and it's something that you really, you push that to the limit on August 26, 2021, the day of your daughter Vivi's kindergarten open house. It coincided with being one of the worst days in the Biden White House. And I got to tell you, I felt for you reading it, Jen. But on this Mother's Day, you managed to be the ultimate working mom. Tell us how you managed that.
Well, it was, first and foremost, as you said, it was the worst day. Of course it was, that I was in the Biden White House. We lost men and women serving our country at the attack on in Kabul. But it was also, as I note, the day of my daughter's kindergarten open house. And I was very mindful about the fact that as much as this is the worst day for the president, a terrible day for the country, it was a very important day for her. And I wanted to be there and be present for her. And so I snuck out of the White House. I snuck out because I didn't feel like it was something I needed to announce to everybody, given the stakes of what was happening that day. I was able to be there for her open house, and I came back just in time to be there as a part of President Biden's remarks review and do my own briefing. It takes nothing away from the significance and horror of that day, but it's just a reminder to me, and that story really exemplifies the difficulty a lot of people face with trying to balance being present in different aspects of your life.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I've got to tell you my secret. I keep my phone on the set with me, and my kids have watched me for umpteen years, and they know, call mom during the commercial break. That's when you can get a hold of her. That's what it is.
And happy Mother's Day to you, Alex.
Happy
Mother's
so much.
Day.
Thank you. It's the best day. Appreciate you, Jen. Appreciate the book
Thank
as
you.
well. It's called Say More, Lessons from Work, the White House and the World. It's a page-turner, folks. And, of course, you can watch Jen on Inside with Jen Psaki, Sundays at noon Eastern, right here on MSNBC. And then keep it on and watch us.